My friends, let us begin not with a problem, not with a question, not even with a hope, but with a pause. Not a pause of inactivity, but a pause of receptivity. For if there is anything that must be understood at the outset of spiritual living, it is this: truth is not something we grasp, it is something that dawns. And it dawns only in the stillness where the personal sense relaxes its hold. We are not here to improve conditions, to change bodies, to correct circumstances, or even to seek healing. Those are the objectives of the human mind, and the human mind has tried them all earnestly, sincerely, tirelessly, and yet the problems of the world remain. Today we are not beginning with the appearance, we are beginning with God. And when we begin with God, we must begin where God is known, not in noise, not in fear, not in effort, but in stillness. Be still and know that I am God. This is not poetry, this is law. It does not say, be anxious and believe. It does not say, strive and affirm. It does not say, battle and overcome. It says, be still. And in that stillness, knowing takes place, not human knowing, but divine recognition. Now I ask you, just for this moment, to lay aside everything you came here with. Lay aside the thought that you are sick or well. Lay aside the thought that you are successful or unsuccessful. Lay aside the thought that you are spiritual or unspiritual. None of these have anything to do with God. And if we are to know God aright, we must temporarily surrender every concept we hold about ourselves. Jesus said, call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your Father which is in heaven. That statement alone dissolves half of human identity. If God is our Father, then the conditions of flesh cannot be our origin. If God is our source, then material history cannot be our cause. If God is our life, then the body cannot be the authority over that life. But these truths cannot be forced upon consciousness. They must be received. And so we begin quietly, gently, without resistance. There is nothing you need to do in this moment. There is nothing you need to think. There is nothing you need to believe harder. There is nothing you need to deny. We are not denying appearances. We are simply refusing to start with them. We are starting with God. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. Notice that this is not a request. It is not a plea. It is not even a declaration of faith. It is a recognition. God is my shepherd. Therefore, the entire burden of life's government is removed from human shoulders. When God governs, man rests. Now you may ask, what about my condition? What about my body? What about my situation? And I tell you gently, none of these can be answered until consciousness is quiet enough to hear the answer. The still, small voice does not compete with human reasoning. It does not argue with fear. It does not shout over anxiety. It waits. Elijah did not find God in the wind, nor in the earthquake, nor in the fire. God was not in the agitation. God was not in the disturbance. God was in the still, small voice. And that voice is not heard by those who are trying to make something happen. It is heard by those who have ceased from effort. So let us, just for a moment, stop trying to understand. Understanding will come, but not now. Let us stop trying to heal. Healing will appear, but not now. Let us stop trying to fix ourselves, justify ourselves, or improve ourselves. None of that has ever brought us closer to God. The kingdom of God cometh not with observation, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Not coming, not approaching is, and because it is, it does not need to be invited. It needs only to be recognized. We are not entering the presence of God. We have never left it. We are not becoming spiritual. We have never been anything else. What is required is not attainment, but surrender. The surrender of false premises, false responsibilities, and false identities. And so, as we sit here together, do not look for something to happen. Do not measure peace. Do not wait for a sensation. Do not judge the moment. Let the moment be. Let God be God. Let truth unfold itself without your assistance, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. This is the foundation of all spiritual healing. This is the beginning of the infinite way, and until this stillness is touched even faintly, no further words will have meaning. Rest here, then, not as a patient, not as a seeker, but as one who is willing for a moment to let go of the struggle and allow God to reveal what already is. Now that we have entered, even in a small degree, into the stillness, we may begin to look quietly, without fear, at one of the most important distinctions ever revealed to human consciousness. It is a distinction upon which the entire ministry of spiritual healing rests, and without which no real progress can be made. That distinction is this: the difference between condition and consciousness. All human thought begins with conditions. The body presents a condition. The world presents a condition. Finances, relationships, health, climate, age, all present themselves as conditions. And the human mind immediately assumes that these conditions are causes. From that moment onward, it begins to labor, to reason, to struggle, to repair, to improve, or to escape. And yet, after centuries of effort, humanity finds itself repeating the same cycle under new names and improved methods. The infinite way begins elsewhere. It does not begin with what appears, it begins with what is. And what is consciousness. Not personal consciousness, not human thought, but that divine consciousness which the scriptures call God. In him we live and move and have our being. This is not metaphor. This is literal truth. If our being is in God, then it cannot be in a body. If our life is in God, then it cannot be in matter. If our intelligence is in God, then it cannot be located in brain cells. And if this is so, then conditions, whatever their name, cannot be causes. They can only be effects. But here the human mind resists. It says, I can see the condition. I can feel it. I can measure it. Surely it must be real. And to this resistance, we bring no argument, no denial, no contradiction. We bring only light. For when light appears, darkness does not need to be fought. It disappears. Jesus never dealt with conditions as causes. He never treated blindness as an eye problem. He never treated paralysis as a nerve problem. He never treated sin as a moral defect. He always addressed consciousness. According to your faith be it unto you, not according to your body, not according to your history, not according to your diagnosis, but according to consciousness. Now let us be very clear. This does not mean that consciousness creates conditions. That would still place power in the human realm. Consciousness does not create, it interprets. And as long as consciousness is interpreting life through the lens of material sense, conditions will appear as real, powerful, and frightening. But when consciousness begins to awaken to spiritual reality, those same conditions lose their authority. The flesh profiteth nothing. That is a hard saying to the human mind, but it is the cornerstone of spiritual understanding. Flesh does not profit because flesh is not cause. It is not origin. It is not law. It is appearance, an effective belief, entertained universally and accepted individually. Now I say this carefully and gently. Your body is not reporting truth to you. It is reporting belief. And belief, no matter how ancient or widespread, is not law. The laws of God are eternal, changeless, and harmonious. They do not suddenly reverse themselves and produce discord. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Not was good once, but is good. Creation is not in a state of decay. Only human perception is. And this is why the work before us is not the correction of matter, but the awakening of perception. When you look at a condition and say, this is my problem, you have already made two errors. First, you have accepted the appearance as real. Second, you have accepted it as personal. The infinite way corrects both errors, not by effort, but by understanding. There is no such thing as my disease, my lack, my fear. These are labels placed upon universal beliefs. And the moment you remove the personal sense, the belief begins to loosen its hold. The moment you see that the condition is not you, you have taken the first step out of bondage. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Notice again, knowing precedes freedom, not treatment, not struggle, not self-improvement. Knowing, and knowing does not mean intellectual agreement. It means recognition, spiritual recognition. We are not here to become better humans. We are here to awaken as spiritual being, and spiritual being does not live under conditions. Spiritual being lives under grace. Grace is not earned. Grace is not deserved. Grace is the natural state of being when consciousness aligns with truth. So we do not ask, how do I change this condition? That question belongs to the human mind. Instead, we gently, quietly turn within and ask nothing at all. We listen. We allow consciousness to be lifted, sometimes imperceptibly, out of the realm of appearances and into the awareness of what eternally is. And as this happens, conditions adjust themselves without effort, not because they are forced to, but because they were never causes to begin with. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you, added not fought for, added not repaired, added not manufactured. When consciousness changes, conditions follow. They have no choice, because they have no power of their own. Let this be enough for now. Do not try to apply it. Do not test it. Do not argue with it. Let it rest in you. Truth does its deepest work when it is allowed to settle quietly, like leaven in the meal. Now we come to a point that has often been misunderstood, sometimes feared, and very often resisted, but without which the entire message of spiritual healing remains incomplete. I speak now of what we call hypnotism, and I ask you, before we go further, to release every personal meaning you have ever attached to that word. We are not speaking of stage hypnotism, nor psychological manipulation, nor anything that one individual does to another. We are speaking of something far more subtle, far more universal, and far more impersonal. Hypnotism in spiritual teaching is simply this: the acceptance of appearances as power, nothing more and nothing less. From the beginning of human history, mankind has lived under a collective belief that the evidence of the senses is reality. What we can see, hear, feel, taste, and touch has been accepted as law. And because this belief has been entertained universally, it has taken on the appearance of authority. It seems to govern life. It seems to determine health, age, strength, decline, and death. But let us be very clear. This is not law, it is belief. And belief, no matter how old, is not truth. Paul tells us plainly, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in high places. He is not speaking of evil beings. He is speaking of false beliefs, beliefs so deeply ingrained, so universally accepted, that they appear as law. That is hypnotism. Hypnotism is the belief that there is a power apart from God. It is the belief that matter has intelligence. It is the belief that the body can decide its own condition. It is the belief that age governs life, that climate governs health, that heredity governs character, that germs govern vitality. And none of these beliefs originated with you. This is a point of great importance, because the moment you believe that disease or discord is the result of your thinking, your fear, your sin, or your failure, you have placed an unbearable burden upon yourself. You have turned spiritual living into self-condemnation, but spiritual truth never condemns. There is therefore now no condemnation to them which are in Christ Jesus. You are not being punished. You are not failing. You are not creating disease. You are awakening out of a belief that has governed humanity for centuries. And this belief operates impersonally, just as gravity operates impersonally. It does not single out individuals. It simply functions wherever it is accepted as law. Jesus made this very clear when he healed the man born blind. When asked who did sin, this man or his parents, Jesus answered, in effect, neither. He refused to place blame. He refused to locate cause. He lifted consciousness entirely out of that level of thinking. He said, I must work the works of him that sent me. In other words, this has nothing to do with personal guilt or history. Hypnotism is not overcome by willpower. It is not defeated by positive thinking. It is not dissolved by affirmations. In fact, any attempt to fight hypnotism only strengthens it, because the fight itself acknowledges its power. This is why Jesus said, resist not evil. Not because evil is dangerous, but because resistance gives it reality. Hypnotism dissolves the moment it is recognized as nothing, not denied, not battled, recognized. When light appears, darkness does not argue, it vanishes. Now understand this clearly. Recognition is not a mental statement. It is not saying, this is nothing. It is the quiet, inner realization that God alone is power. And where that realization dawns, hypnotism has no place to stand. All power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. If all power belongs to God, then where is the power in disease? Where is the power in age? Where is the power in fear? There is none except as belief assigns it. And this is why we say you are not sick, you are not diseased, you are not broken. What appears as disease is a presentation to consciousness, nothing more. It has no law to sustain it, no intelligence to direct it, no life to maintain it. It is a shadow cast by belief, and a shadow disappears when the light is turned on. Now, do not attempt to turn on the light. That is still effort. Simply allow the truth to register. God is omnipresent. There is no place where God is not. There is no moment where God is absent. There is no condition outside of God. And because this is true, hypnotism has no reality. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Not less darkness, not overcoming darkness, but no darkness at all. This is the nature of spiritual realization. It does not negotiate with appearances. It does not analyze them. It simply abides in truth. So when a condition presents itself, whether in the body, the mind, or the affairs of life, you need not ask, how do I get rid of this? That question belongs to hypnotism. Instead, you quietly turn within and rest in the awareness God is. And in that awareness, without effort, without words, without direction, the false sense begins to dissolve. This is not mysticism for the few. This is the natural state of being when consciousness returns to its source. It is not dramatic. It is not sensational. It is gentle, quiet, and profoundly normal. Let us not rush beyond this. Let it settle. Hypnotism loses its power the moment it is seen not as personal failure, but as impersonal belief. And in that seeing, freedom begins. Now we come to a point where many sincere seekers unknowingly delay their freedom, not through neglect, not through indifference, but through earnest effort in the wrong direction. I speak of the habit of searching for causes, and I say it once so that there be no misunderstanding. The desire to know why something has happened is natural to the human mind, but it is precisely this desire that must be gently laid aside if spiritual realization is to take place. The moment we ask, what caused this? We have already accepted the appearance as real. We have granted it legitimacy. We have assumed that it has a history, a law, and a continuity. And having done so, we then attempt to trace it back to some point in the past, perhaps a thought, an emotion, a diet, an accident, a heredity, or even a sin. But all of this activity takes place entirely within the realm of hypnotism. Jesus never searched for causes. Never once did he ask, how long has this been? Never did he inquire into heredity, diet, or mental states. Never did he analyze the past. When confronted with discord, he turned entirely away from it and said, in effect, rise. And the rising took place not because a cause was removed, but because consciousness was lifted above the level where causes seem to operate. The human mind believes that if it can locate the cause, it can correct the condition. This belief governs medicine, psychology, and much of metaphysics. But spiritual wisdom reveals something far more radical, that error has no cause. It is not caused by mind, matter, emotion, or circumstance. It is sustained only by belief, belief accepted as law. When you search for causes, you keep attention fixed on the appearance. You keep consciousness anchored in the very realm from which you are seeking release. You are, in effect, saying, this has something behind it. This has a reason for being. And so long as that assumption remains, hypnotism continues its work. The scriptures tell us, before Abraham was, I am. This is not a statement of history. It is a statement of timeless being. Truth has no past. Reality has no origin in time. God did not begin, and God does not change. Therefore, anything that appears to begin, to develop, to worsen, or to improve cannot be of God. And if it is not of God, it has no cause, no law, and no continuity. Here we must be very gentle with ourselves. Many students, upon hearing this, attempt to stop thinking about causes, but that too is effort. We are not asked to suppress thought. We are asked to outgrow a false premise. And false premises fall away naturally when light is allowed to enter. Consider this. If God is infinite, where could a cause exist outside of God? If God is omnipresent, where could a power arise that God did not create? And if God is omnipotent, what power could operate independently? These questions are not meant to be answered intellectually. They are meant to dissolve the very framework in which the problem appears. Known unto God are all his works from the beginning of the world. God does not discover conditions. God does not investigate causes. God knows only what God is. And when we align ourselves even slightly with that divine knowing, we, too, cease to search among appearances. There is a deep relief that comes when one finally gives up the search for causes. It is the relief of no longer needing to fix the past. It is the relief of no longer needing to correct oneself. It is the relief of no longer carrying the burden of explanation. In that relief, consciousness begins to lift, not dramatically, not suddenly, but surely. This is why the infinite way does not treat disease, sin, or lack. It treats belief by seeing through it, and belief cannot be analyzed away. It must be seen as belief. The moment you recognize that what confronts you is not a cause but an appearance, its authority begins to dissolve. The prince of this world cometh, and hath nothing in me. That is the Christ consciousness speaking. It does not deny appearances. It simply finds no reality in them. And because it finds nothing to react to, nothing to oppose, nothing to fear, appearances lose their power. So when a condition presents itself, and it will from time to time, do not ask, why did this happen? Do not ask, what did I do wrong? Do not ask, how do I correct this? Those questions belong to a world of two powers. Instead, quietly turn within and rest in the awareness of God's presence. God is not in the cause. God is not in the explanation. God is not in the condition. God is in being. And when consciousness abides in being, the search for causes ceases of its own accord. Let this be enough for now. Do not practice it. Do not apply it. Simply allow the truth to work where it alone can work in consciousness. For when consciousness changes, causes disappear because they were never there. Now we come to what may be called the great turning point in spiritual healing, the place where bondage begins to loosen and freedom quietly enters consciousness. It is the point at which we learn, often slowly, sometimes reluctantly, to release personal ownership of appearances. And here again, I ask you to listen without fear, because impersonalization is not loss, it is liberation. Human sense insists upon saying, this is my problem, this is my sickness, this is my fear, this is my life. And the moment we say my, we have accepted responsibility for something that was never ours to begin with. We have placed ourselves at the center of a universe that was never meant to revolve around personal sense. Jesus never personalized error. Never once do we find him saying, your disease, your sin, or your failure. He spoke of appearances as something to be seen through, not something to be owned. Why callest thou me good? He asked. There is none good but one, that is, God. In that single statement, he removed personality from both good and evil and placed all reality back where it belongs in God. Impersonalization does not mean that we become indifferent, cold, or detached. On the contrary, it is the highest form of compassion. For the moment we see error as personal, we bind ourselves and others to it. But when we see it as impersonal belief, no longer owned, no longer identified with, we open the door to freedom. Here is the great truth. Error does not belong to you. It does not originate in you. It is not sustained by you, and it cannot remain when you cease to claim it. The moment you say, even faintly within yourself, this is not me, you have begun to break the spell. Paul understood this when he said, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. He was not excusing wrongdoing. He was removing identity from appearance. He was refusing to condemn himself. He was refusing to make error personal. And in that refusal, he found grace. Now let us be very careful here. Impersonalization is not saying this is someone else's fault. It is not transferring blame. It is removing blame altogether. It is recognizing that what appears as disease, sin, or lack is a universal belief presenting itself nothing more, and a belief, once seen as belief, loses its power. When you say, I am sick, you have made sickness part of your identity. When you say, I am afraid, you have made fear part of your being. But when you quietly recognize there is a belief of sickness presenting itself, or there is an appearance of fear, you have stepped back into the position of witness, and the witness is never bound by what is witnessed. Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. Righteous judgment is not condemnation. It is right seeing. It is seeing that God alone is real, and that anything unlike God cannot have true existence. And this seeing is not mental. It is spiritual. Impersonalization is the activity of Christ consciousness. It is the Christ that says, neither do I condemn thee. Notice that Jesus did not say, you were right, nor did he say, you were wrong. He removed the entire framework of judgment. He lifted consciousness above the level where condemnation operates. This is why spiritual healing cannot take place where there is guilt, whether guilt toward oneself or toward another. Guilt personalizes error. Grace dissolves it, and grace comes only when we relinquish ownership. You may ask, but if it is not mine, why am I experiencing it? And the answer is simple, though not always easy to accept, because belief operates wherever it is accepted as law. But the moment belief is recognized as belief, it no longer governs. Think of a dream. While dreaming, the dream appears real, personal, and threatening. But the moment you awaken, the dream does not need to be fought. It does not need to be fixed. It vanishes because consciousness has risen above it. So it is with appearances in human experience. Awake, thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light. Christ does not give you a new condition. Christ gives you light. And in that light, conditions change of their own accord. So we do not take responsibility for appearances. We take responsibility only for one thing: maintaining our orientation toward God. We do not watch the body. We do not monitor the mind. We do not analyze circumstances. We turn within and rest in the awareness that God is the only presence and the only power. Let this truth be received gently. Do not force impersonalization. Do not repeat words. Simply allow the recognition to dawn: I am not the source of this, and therefore I am not its victim. God is the source of being, and God knows nothing of discord. Here, in this release of ownership, the great burden begins to lift. Fear loosens its grip, struggle fades, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, begins to be felt not as emotion, but as assurance. Now we come to the heart of the infinite way, the place where all previous unfoldment gently resolves itself into a single, simple realization. Everything that has been said thus far, stillness, consciousness, hypnotism, impersonalization, leads inevitably to this: there is one presence and one power. And where this is realized, hypnotism does not need to be overcome, because there is nothing left for it to act upon. Human experience is built upon the belief in two powers. Sometimes we call them good and evil, sometimes health and disease, sometimes God and something else. But always, in some form, there is the belief that God exists alongside an opposing force. And it is this belief, not disease, not sin, not lack, that constitutes the root of bondage. Hear this clearly. God is not a power over something. God is not a force contending with other forces. God is not greater than evil. God is all, and that which is all cannot have an opposite. I am the Lord, and there is none else. This is not theological poetry. It is spiritual fact. If there is none else, then what we have feared, resisted, treated, and struggled against has never possessed power. It has possessed belief, and belief dissolves when truth is realized. The human mind asks, but what about the evidence? And again we answer gently. Evidence is not power. Evidence is testimony of belief. If evidence were law, no miracle could ever have taken place. Yet throughout Scripture, the evidence of the senses repeatedly yielded not to force, not to denial, but to realization. When Jesus stood before Lazarus' tomb, he did not battle death. He did not argue with decay. He did not deny what the senses reported. He simply said, Father, I thank thee that thou hast heard me. He began with God, and beginning with God, he left no room for another power. This is the place where hypnotism dissolves not because it is attacked, but because it is starved of recognition. Hypnotism lives only where there is belief in something other than God. The moment consciousness rests in the awareness of one presence, hypnotism has nothing to attach itself to. You see now why effort fails. Effort implies resistance. Resistance implies opposition. Opposition implies two powers. And the moment two powers are admitted, spiritual realization is postponed. This is why truth is not used to overcome error. Truth is not a weapon. Truth is light, And light does not fight darkness. It reveals its absence. God is light, and in him is no darkness at all. Not less darkness, not defeated darkness, but no darkness at all. This is the standpoint of spiritual healing. From this standpoint, disease is not an enemy. It is an illusion of sense. Fear is not a force. It is a belief without foundation. Lack is not a condition. It is a misinterpretation of supply. When consciousness abides in the awareness of one presence, reactions cease. And this is of the utmost importance. Reaction is the acknowledgement of another power. Reaction gives energy to appearances. Reaction sustains the hypnotic spell. But when reaction stops, not by discipline, but by realization, appearances lose their vitality. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Notice, hold your peace, not your argument, not your affirmation, not your resistance. Peace is the natural state of consciousness that knows one. Power. Now, let us be very practical. When a claim presents itself, whether as pain, fear, news, or circumstance, do not rush to do something about it. That rush itself is the confession of two powers. Instead, pause, not to think, not to pray for change, but to acknowledge quietly God is. And if God is, nothing else can be power. This is not something you repeat. It is something you rest in. And resting is not inactivity, it is trust. It is yielding the false responsibility of governing life back to its rightful source. The government shall be upon his shoulder, not yours, not mine. God governs God's universe. And that universe includes you, not as a vulnerable body, but as spiritual being. As this realization deepens, you will notice something subtle but profound. Fear no longer has urgency. Symptoms no longer demand attention. Problems no longer define the day, not because they have vanished immediately, but because they have lost authority. They are no longer treated as power. And here is the great secret. The moment appearances lose authority, they begin to fade. Not always instantly, not always dramatically, but surely, for there is no law to sustain them once belief withdraws. Remain here. Do not go forward too quickly. This realization cannot be rushed. It must be lived with, rested in, returned to again and again until it becomes natural. One presence, one power, one life, one being, and in that oneness, the spell is broken. Now we arrive at a point where many students, having followed thus far with sincerity and understanding, unconsciously reach for something to do. The human mind is accustomed to practice, to discipline, to methods and formulas, and yet, here we must pause again because what now unfolds cannot be approached through technique. It is not something you practice, it is something you allow. Turning within is not meditation as the world understands it. It is not concentration. It is not visualization. It is not repeating sacred words. It is not directing thought. All of these still belong to the realm of mind, and mind is not the instrument through which God is known. Be still and know, not think, not affirm, not declare, know. Knowing is not an activity. It is a state of awareness that comes when activity ceases. To turn within, then, is simply to stop turning without. Most of life is lived outwardly. We look to the body for information. We look to the world for confirmation. We look to others for reassurance. And every time we do this, we reinforce the belief that power, life, and intelligence exist outside of God. Turning within is the quiet withdrawal from this habit. Jesus called it praying in secret. Enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father, which is in secret. This closet is not a room. It is consciousness. And shutting the door does not mean excluding the world. It means excluding the belief that the world governs life. Now listen carefully. When you turn within, do not go looking for God. God is not lost. God is not absent. God is not hiding behind thoughts. God is already present. Turning within is not a search. It is a surrender of the search. There may be moments when you feel nothing at all. Let them be. There may be moments when the mind is restless. Let it be. There may be moments when fear tries to reassert itself. Let it be. None of these have power. They are movements of the surface. You are not required to still them. They still themselves when you stop engaging with them. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Standing still is not physical immobility. It is the cessation of mental interference. Salvation is not achieved. It is revealed. In this inward turning, you are not asking God to do something that would imply that God has not already done it. You are not asking to be healed, guided, or supplied. You are acknowledging quietly that God is. And in that acknowledgement, communion takes place. Communion is not conversation. It is not words exchanged. It is awareness shared. It is the recognition of presence. It is the deep inner assurance that says, without sound or language, all is well. Elijah heard a still small voice, and that voice was not instruction. It was not explanation. It was presence. And presence needs no explanation. As you rest in this inward turning, whether for a few moments or longer, do not evaluate the experience. Do not say, this is working or this is not working. Evaluation belongs to the mind. Awareness belongs to the soul. Let the experience be what it is. Over time, you may notice that this inward resting begins to carry over into daily life. You react less. You hurry less. You fear less. You do not need to protect yourself as much. Not because you have become strong, but because you have ceased to believe in opposing powers. This is prayer without words. This is meditation without effort. This is worship without form. It is the simple acknowledgement of God as the only presence. Abide in me, and I in you. Abiding is not striving. It is remaining. And you cannot remain in God by effort, any more than you can remain in sunlight by thinking about it. You remain by not leaving. So when you find yourself pulled outward again, as you will do, not condemn yourself, simply return, gently, quietly, without urgency. The return itself is grace. And here, in this turning within, healing does not need to be mentioned. Harmony does not need to be sought. Supply does not need to be requested. These are not separate acts of God. They are the natural outflow of divine presence realized. Remain here as often as you can, not by schedule, not by rule, but by inclination. And trust this, what is revealed in silence will govern life without your assistance. Now we come to something that touches every human heart, whether spoken of openly or hidden carefully beneath spiritual language. I speak of fear. Fear of disease, fear of lack, fear of the future, fear of loss, fear of death. And yet, even here, we must be careful not to give fear a place of importance. Fear is not an enemy to be conquered. It is not a power to be overcome. Fear is a shadow, and shadows disappear when light is present. Most people believe that fear must be resisted, disciplined, controlled, or replaced with courage. But all such efforts still assume that fear has power. And the moment we grant fear power, we have already stepped into the belief in two powers. Fear lives only where there is a belief in separation from God. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear. Notice that fear is not cast out by effort, nor by bravery, nor by human will. It is cast out by love, not human affection, but divine, love realized. Love does not fight fear. It dissolves it by filling consciousness. Fear is sustained by anticipation. It lives in tomorrow. It feeds upon memory of yesterday. But God is always now, and in the now, fear has no footing. When consciousness rests in the awareness of God's presence, fear finds no place to stand. Think of this carefully. Fear is always concerned with something that might happen, or something that did happen. God is concerned only with what is, and what is infinite life, infinite love, infinite being. When consciousness abides here, fear is not addressed. It is forgotten. Jesus did not tell his disciples to fight fear. He said, "Take no thought for your life." Not because life is unimportant, but because life is already secure in God. Thought here means anxious thought that assumes responsibility for outcomes. And when responsibility is relinquished, fear loses its purpose. Fear also thrives on ownership, my body, my future, my security. But when we have learned, even in a small degree, to say, "The Lord is my shepherd," fear begins to loosen its grip. A shepherd governs. Sheep do not plan their own protection. They follow. And following, in the spiritual sense, is yielding. Fear not, for I am with thee. God does not say, "Fear not," because nothing can happen. God says, "Fear not, because I am." Presence is the answer to fear, not explanation, not reassurance, not prediction. Presence. Now here is something of great importance. Fear cannot be reasoned away. Reason belongs to the mind, and fear often outlives reason. But fear cannot survive realization. The moment consciousness feels even faintly the presence of God, fear begins to fade. Not always instantly, not always completely, but inevitably. You may notice that when fear is not fought, it does not intensify. It weakens. When fear is observed without reaction, it loses momentum. Reaction feeds fear. Stillness starves it. This is why we do not say, "I must get rid of fear." That very statement keeps fear alive. Instead, we turn within, rest in God, and allow fear to dissolve naturally like mist in the morning sun. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? Not what shall I fear, but whom. Fear is personified only when we believe in another power. When that belief is gone, fear has no identity. As this understanding deepens, you will find that fear does not dominate your decisions. You may still encounter situations that once frightened you, but they will not govern you. You will feel a quiet assurance, not excitement, not confidence in self, but trust in God. And trust is not something you cultivate. It is something that appears when fear has gone. Let us not hurry beyond this. Fear does not vanish because we wish it to. It vanishes because consciousness no longer supplies it with belief. Remain gently in the awareness of God's presence. Let that presence do what it alone can do. Now we come to a point where many sincere students falter, not because they lack understanding, but because of a habit so ingrained that it seems almost impossible to relinquish. I speak of the habit of watching the body, observing it, checking it, measuring it, waiting for it to report improvement or decline, and yet, until this habit is gently outgrown, spiritual realization remains partial. The body was never intended to be an authority. It was never meant to be consulted for truth. It was never designed to testify to reality. The body is an instrument, nothing more. And an instrument does not govern the musician. Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost? A temple does not determine the activity of God. A temple is the place where God is expressed. And when we understand this, the entire relationship between consciousness and body is transformed. Most people live as though the body were the source of life. They listen to it as though it were intelligence. They obey it as though it were law. But life does not originate in the body, nor is it sustained by it. The flesh profiteth nothing. That does not mean the body is evil or unimportant. It means it has no power of its own. Now let us be very clear. Turning away from watching the body does not mean neglect. It does not mean indifference. It does not mean recklessness. It means refusing to grant the body authority over consciousness. It means no longer asking the body for permission to live in peace. When you continually check the body, is it better? Is it worse? Is it the same? You are still confessing that the body knows something and the body knows nothing. It reports only what belief has impressed upon it. Jesus never consulted the body. He never waited to see if improvement had taken place. He never returned to check symptoms. He spoke from realization, and then he walked on. Rise, take up thy bed, and walk. And having said this, he did not linger to observe the process. This is difficult for the human mind to accept, because the human mind believes safety lies in vigilance. But spiritual safety lies in trust. Watching the body is not protection, it is surveillance. And surveillance is fear in subtle form. Take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat, or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body. This does not mean life and body are unimportant. It means they are already under divine government. And what God governs does not require human supervision. Now hear this gently. The more attention you give to the body, the more it demands attention. The less attention you give to it, the more it settles into harmony. This is not because neglect heals, but because belief withdraws its pressure. The body reflects consciousness. When consciousness is at rest, the body follows. You may ask, but how do I stop watching the body? And the answer is, you do not try. Trying only shifts attention back to the body again. You simply begin to live. You go about your day as normally as possible. You engage with life. You turn your interest outward, not in distraction, but in participation. The life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God. Faith here is not belief in healing. It is trust in God's government. You live by trusting that God is maintaining what God has created. If discomfort presents itself, you do not analyze it. You do not dramatize it. You do not label it. You quietly acknowledge this is not authority. And then you return to whatever is before you, not with indifference, but with assurance. As this becomes natural, you will find that the body occupies less and less of your awareness. It does not dominate thought. It does not define the day. It becomes, once again, what it was always meant to be, an instrument through which life expresses itself. And here is the great freedom. When the body is no longer watched, it is no longer feared. And when it is no longer feared, it no longer governs. Let us not rush this. Habits dissolve gently. Do not judge yourself if attention returns to the body from time to time. Simply return again to trust. Return again to God. Return again to the awareness that life is not in matter, but in spirit. At this point, it is necessary to correct one of the most subtle misunderstandings that has followed spiritual teaching through the centuries. It is the belief that healing is the purpose of prayer, the objective of meditation, or the goal of spiritual living. And while healing does occur and does so naturally and beautifully, it is never the aim. Healing is the effect of something far greater. God is not a healer in the human sense. God is life. And life, when unobstructed by belief, expresses itself as harmony. Healing is simply harmony, becoming visible where discord seemed to be. When we set out to be healed, we are still starting from the problem. We are still granting reality to the appearance. We are still measuring spiritual success by physical change. And this keeps consciousness tied to effect rather than cause. Jesus never sought healing. He sought the Father. I seek not mine own will, but the will of the Father which hath sent me. The will of the Father is not that disease be removed. It is that divine life be known. When life is known, disease is irrelevant. There is a vast difference between turning to God for healing and turning to God alone. When you turn to God for healing, your attention remains divided. One eye is on God, the other on the condition. But when you turn to God alone, healing has no audience. It occurs without notice. He that seeketh his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. This is not about physical death. It is about surrendering the personal sense of life, the sense that life must be managed, protected, repaired. When this sense is lost, true life is found. Now, many students worry that if they stop seeking healing, healing will not happen. But the opposite is true. The very act of seeking healing keeps the problem alive. It keeps consciousness engaged with discord. When the desire to be healed dissolves into the desire to know God, the body is freed from the burden of demonstrating wellness. Healing does not require your attention. God does not need your focus on disease in order to remove it. God needs only recognition, and recognition is not concentration. It is awareness. In the early stages of spiritual study, healing may seem dramatic, even miraculous. But as understanding deepens, healing becomes quieter, more incidental. It is no longer an event. It is a state of being. Harmony becomes normal. Discord becomes foreign. This is why advanced students often experience fewer dramatic healings, not because less is happening, but because less is noticed. Life flows more smoothly. Problems dissolve before they are named. Needs are met before they are felt. Before they call, I will answer. This does not mean God anticipates requests. It means God is already functioning as fulfillment. There is no gap between need and supply when consciousness abides in God. If you find yourself tempted to measure your progress by physical improvement, gently release that habit. Measurement belongs to the human mind. Spiritual realization does not announce itself through symptoms. It announces itself through peace. And peace is the true sign of healing, not excitement, not relief, not celebration. Peace, let healing take care of itself. Let the body take care of itself. Let the world take care of itself. Your work is singular, to abide in God. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Added, not achieved, not earned, not forced, added naturally, quietly, effortlessly. When healing is no longer your goal, you will discover that you are whole. Now we come to the most delicate point of all, and perhaps the one where even seasoned students may unknowingly slip. Having tasted grace, having experienced moments of peace, clarity, or release, there is a subtle temptation to maintain them. And the moment we attempt to maintain grace, grace has already departed, not because it is withdrawn, but because effort has returned. Grace is not something you hold on to. Grace is something you live in when you are no longer holding on to anything at all. Paul tells us, by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God. A gift cannot be earned. It cannot be preserved by vigilance. It can only be received and continually received by non-resistance. Effort always begins with the belief that something can be lost. Grace rests in the understanding that nothing real can be taken away. My peace I give unto you, not as the world giveth, give I unto you. The world gives conditionally. God gives eternally. You may notice, as time goes on, that moments arise when peace seems distant again, when effort sneaks back in under the guise of responsibility or discipline. Do not be disturbed by this. Awareness is not linear. Growth is not measured by constancy of experience, but by depth of understanding. When effort returns, do not fight it. Fighting effort is effort. Simply notice it and gently let it go. Say within yourself, not as an affirmation, but as a yielding Father, thy grace is sufficient. And then rest. Grace does not require guarding. Grace governs itself. The spiritual life is not a tightrope walk where one misstep sends us falling. It is a river. Sometimes the current is felt strongly, sometimes it seems still. But the river does not stop flowing because it is unseen. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Ordered, not planned, not controlled. When grace governs, life unfolds naturally. Decisions are made without strain. Guidance appears without seeking. Right action happens without anxiety. If you attempt to live spiritually by constant awareness of spirituality, you will tire. But if you allow spirituality to live, effort ceases. You are not required to remember God every moment. God remembers you, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. This is not poetry. It is a literal instruction. Care is weight. Cast it off. Grace bears what you were never meant to carry. Remain simple. Complexity belongs to the mind. Grace is uncomplicated. It does not demand progress reports or self-evaluation. It simply is. When life is lived from grace, something very quiet yet very profound takes place. The sense of personal authorship fades. You no longer feel that you are making life happen. Life happens through you. I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. This is not metaphor. It is an actual state of consciousness. Life ceases to feel burdensome because it is no longer personal. You may still work, you may still plan, you may still act, but action is no longer driven by fear or ambition. It flows from inner assurance, and this assurance does not shout, it whispers. In such a life, problems are not dramatized. They are addressed quietly, or they dissolve without ever becoming problems at all. Relationships soften. Circumstances rearrange themselves. Supply appears in forms you could not have imagined. This does not happen because you have mastered spiritual laws. It happens because you have stopped interfering with divine law. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Holding your peace does not mean passivity. It means refraining from mental warfare. God does not require your strategies. As this way of living becomes natural, you will find that gratitude replaces striving. Not gratitude for outcomes, but gratitude for being. Gratitude becomes a state, not a response. You will also find compassion deepening. Not pity, not concern, but recognition. You no longer see others as broken or lacking. You see them as God sees them, even when appearances suggest otherwise. This is not naivete. It is spiritual seeing. And from this seeing, blessing flows, often without words, often without intent. Your very presence becomes healing. Not because you try to heal, but because you are no longer obstructing the presence that heals. We come now to the place where words themselves grow thin. There is nothing new to be learned here, only something to be surrendered. Jesus' final words from the cross were not a cry of defeat. They were a statement of completion. It is finished. Not I am finished, but it is. The struggle, the effort, the belief in separation. Every spiritual journey leads here not to achievement, but to release. You are not required to perfect yourself. You are not required to overcome your past. You are not required to fix your future. You are required only to yield the belief that you were ever separate from God. The kingdom of God is at hand, not approaching, not developing, at hand. In this yielding, prayer ceases to be something you do and becomes something you are. Life ceases to be something you manage and becomes something you witness. Healing ceases to be something you seek and becomes something you allow. Rest here, not as an ending, but as a dwelling place. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Let that be enough.